there's a special mitzvah that we get to do this time of the year, and is we get to count the Omer. So and what's cool about it is because the scheduling of the class, we get to count during the daytime. We get to count for today before we start the class, and by the time we'll be finished, we can already count for tomorrow. So we get to count twice. So I put it up on the screen. So we'll say it together. This is for today, the day that's almost over. Today is 31 days, which is 4 weeks and 3 days of the Omer. If we say that, it's a mitzvah.
Okay. Today is the 31 day, 4 weeks of the Omer.
Beautiful. Okay, when we're done, I'm gonna come back to the screen. We're gonna do the next one, and okay.
It's okay. I once flew to Israel on El Al, and we had so many minions. We moved the pole.
Oh, I can imagine. Okay. So last time I said that I'm gonna prepare a joke before we start. So I just thought of a joke, and it's slightly connected with the topic. So the joke goes that there's a psychologist. He's sitting in his office one night. For whatever reason, he was in office. Maybe it was during the winter months. The sun set early. It was already dark outside. Sitting in his office, and suddenly a moth flies in. And the moth says to the psychologist, says, "Could you help me? I'm a moth." And the psychologist says, "So what are you doing here?" So he says, "I don't know, but the light was on."
I like that one.
So we're talking about light. So that's why that joke came up. So last week we spoke about the converts, people that were not born Jewish, and how they became Jewish, and the contributions that they each had in their own unique way to the Jewish community, to Jewish life, Jewish history. So today we're going to learn kind of the opposite. We're going to learn about 3 rabbis who were very well connected besides for the Jewish community, they were very well connected in the non-Jewish world, and they made very big impacts on history, each in their own way, and we're going to get to see that. But before we start with the stories, so there's 3 different rabbis we're going to get into. Before we start with that, so I want to talk about the famous saying that the Jewish people are a light unto the nations. So I've never knew this until I prepared this class, but I heard this expression. I didn't really know where it came from, but sure enough, it's in the verse. It's in Isaiah. Probably everyone knew this, probably, but I didn't know this. So text number 1, we're going to read the verse, and then we're going to read in text number 2, we're going to read the explanation of the verse. We'll start with Lee, I guess. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes. If I just talk this loudly, can you hear me?
Yeah, I could hear you.
Okay. So said Almighty God, who created the heavens and stretched them out, spread out the earth with all that springs from it, and gave a soul to its people and life to those who walk on it. I, God, have called you with righteousness. I will strengthen your hand. I will protect you, and I will set you as a covenant for all people and a light unto the nations.
Beautiful. So we have the message from God himself that I will set you as a light unto the nations. So what does that mean? I mean, the Jewish people are making light? Are we did we invent the light bulb? What exactly is the light?
We're supposed to be an example, following the commandments, the moral code.
Okay, very good. Exactly. So here we have, in text number 2, we have the commentary, Rabbi David Kimchi. It's funny, I had a classmate growing up, his last name was Kimchi. I don't know if he's related, but this Rabbi David Kimchi is going back 500 years. He lived in Italy. We're actually going to mention him later in the class a little bit.
I love his name, kimchi. There's a Korean dish made of cabbage called kimchi.
Oh, really?
It's amazing. It's called kimchi.
So just the name is already tasty. Korean.
Mm.
Okay. Wanna try it out? Could you make it kosher?
I don't know, because they put weird stuff in it, and becomes fermented and a
Oh
probiotic.
wow.
It's kind of in the family of sauerkraut, but different, and it's spicy hot.
Might be
I've
kosher.
been looking for some kosher kimchi, because it's delicious.
My son was stationed in Korea for a while. He was a member of the synagogue there.
Wow. So they probably served that for the kiddush or
I
stuff.
don't know. I wasn't there.
Huh. I just looked it up, Rabbi. It says kimchi can be kosher for Passover, but it depends on the specific ingredients and whether it's been certified kosher for Passover. Some types of kimchi may contain non-kosher ingredients like shrimp they can add, but you can make it kosher for Passover. You can make it kosher for regular.
Wow, okay. I want to try it out one day.
Okay,
Okay, so Rabbi David Kimchi, he wrote one of the most famous commentaries on not on the Torah itself, but on the prophets. He wrote a commentary, and it's one of I mean, there's probably the second most famous commentary. So this is what he says on that verse in Isaiah. This is what he says in text number 2. He explains what it means, a light unto the nations. Like,
the
yeah.
Jewish people are destined to be a light unto the nations, as the verse states. Nations will go by your light, and kings by the brightness of your radiance, in Isaiah 63. This refers to the light of the Torah, which will issue forth to the nations from Zion. The Jewish people will sustain the nations of the world through guiding them to observe the 7 Noahide laws and to walk in the proper path, as the verse states. Multitudes of nations will go to each other and tell one another, "Come, let us ascend to the mountain of God, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. For the Torah will issue forth from Zion the word of the God from Jerusalem, Yerushalayim."
Beautiful. Yeah, so there's the Torah, and then there's a light of the Torah, right? So we don't have to get the whole world to be following the Torah. That's not our job,
My job's to let them know that the Torah is there.
right? Okay, so we want to share them the light of the Torah. So like you mentioned here, and we're going to come back to this also a little bit later, the concept of the 7 Noahide laws. There's a concept that besides for the mitzvahs, the 613 mitzvahs that God gave us on Mount Sinai, he also gave 7 Noahide laws for the whole humanity, everyone who's a descendant of Noah, which is everyone around, at least every human being that's around today. So this is how he explains what the light of the Torah means. Okay, so that with that in mind, we're gonna explore 3 rabbis, and each of them did a great job in being a light unto the nations. So the first one is known as Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid. Hanagid is not a last name. So Hanagid is like a title. Hanagid means the prince. They called him Rabbi Shmuel the prince. Actually, I don't know if they called him rabbi. They called him Shmuel the prince. Shmuel Hanagid.
Not his prince.
Yeah. There's I guess we'll start with reading. We'll read text number 3. This is from a book which is written afterward, like the century after he lived. There's a book that was written that recorded different different things in history, and there's like an entry about Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid. So text number 3. Yeah, take it away.
How far into this it has to be read? Because I have trouble reading.
It is very long. You know what? I guess I'll read it if you want. There's actually, and we actually read two quotes from this book, so it's very long. Okay, I'll read this one. Okay. Text number 3. One of the outstanding disciples of Rabbi Chanoch ben Moshe was Rabbi Shmuel Halevi the Nagid, the prince, the son of Rabbi Yosef, surnamed his last name was Ibn Nagrela, of the community of Cordoba. So this is, by the way, I didn't mention the year, but this is in the 10th century, going back 1,000 years. This is when he lived. He was in Spain. Oh, I have an issue here. There we go. Aside from being a great Torah scholar and highly cultured person, Rabbi Shmuel was highly versed in Arabic literature and style, and was indeed competent to serve in the king's palace. Nevertheless, he maintained himself in very modest circumstances as a spice merchant until the time when war broke out in Spain, with the termination of the rule of the house of Ibn Abi Amir and the seizure of power by the Berber chiefs. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The city of Cordoba dwindled, and its inhabitants were compelled to flee. Rabbi Shmuel fled to Malaga, where he occupied a shop as a spice merchant. His shop happened to adjoin the courtyard of Abul Qasim ibn al-Arif, the vizier and scribe of King Habus, the son of Maksan, the Berber king of Granada. We're gonna review these details later. So now we're just giving ourselves a kind of introduction. Yeah, as a result, the scribe's maidservant would ask Rabbi Shmuel to write letters for her to her master when he was away from home. When Ibn Arif received the letters, he was astounded at the learning they reflected. Consequently, when after some time the scribe was given leave by King Habus to return to his home in Malaga, he asked the people from his household, who wrote the letters that I received from you? They replied, a certain Jew from the community of Cordoba, who lives next door to your courtyard, wrote them on our behalf. The scribe ordered that Rabbi Shmuel be brought to him at once. He told him, it does not become you to spend your time in a shop. From now on, you are to stay at my side. He thus became the scribe and a counselor of the counselor to the king. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Probably a typo. Counselor of the counselor to the king. Okay. The counsel that Rabbi Shmuel provided was remarkable and accurate, as if one had consulted with the oracle of Hashem. Thanks to his counsel, King Habus achieved successes and became exceedingly great. Subsequently, when the scribe Ibn al-Arif took ill and felt his death approaching, King Habus paid him a visit and said to him, what am I going to do? Who will counsel me in the wars that surround me on every side?
Rabbi, I think the counselor of the counselor means that the king already had a counselor, and this man was to guide him.
Oh, so he was the counselor of the counselor. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Ibn al-Arif replied, I never counseled you out of my own mind, but out of the mind of this Jew, my scribe. Look after him well and let him be like a father and a guide to you. Do whatever he says and God will help him. Accordingly, after the scribe's death, King Habus brought Rabbi Shmuel Halevi to his palace and made him scribe and counselor. Thus, he entered the king's palace in the year 1020. So that's our introduction. So let's do some facts and let's figure out who this Rabbi Shmuel is. So,
okay, this king was a king in Spain?
Yes. So Rabbi Shmuel was born to, we mentioned some of these we're going to go over. So Rabbi Shmuel was born to a man named Yosef in Cordoba, Spain. At that time, Spain I don't know for how long this was, but Spain was most of Spain was ruled by Muslim kingdoms. There are different little kingdoms.
So this was before the evil queen was the queen of Spain.
Right. Yeah. So the expulsion happened in the 1496, I think.
That's right. This is in the 10.
So this is 500 years before that. So Rabbi Shmuel's father was a spice merchant. Now I always used to think a spice merchant means like someone he has a good business. But apparently in those days, spice merchants, it was like everyone was a spice merchant.
Oh,
and one of those things, it's like you didn't make a lot of money if you were a spice merchant. So he didn't have a rich household. He grew up, but he had a very good head, and he studied. And around the age of 20, we mentioned there was some sort of civil war. There was something going on in Cordoba where he lived, and it wasn't a safe place, and most people left. So he ended up moving away to Malaga. So let's look at the map. It's a little small, but here we have. This is a modern map of Spain, but all these cities we're mentioning still exist. So right there is Cordoba. Malaga is down there at the coast. It's a port city. So he lived. So Rabbi Shmuel fled to Malaga, and that's where he opened up his own spice business. He had a little shop. He probably wasn't doing that amazing financially either, but he was very smart and he knew how to write. He was very good at writing. They also say he had a very good handwriting, so he would write Torah scrolls and all kinds of stuff. And he was just a very modest, humble person. So people didn't really know. He wasn't a rabbi. He didn't have a congregation. But somehow, as we read in the story, the someone who worked for the palace right here in Granada. So this is a little further up. All these cities are within like 100 miles approximately. So right here is Granada. So that was the capital of that kingdom. That was actually, I think on the next screen I might have here. This was, I guess, the kingdom of Granada. Right, that entire area of Spain is modern day Spain, but just Granada, this particular kingdom was just that area. Um, so this
Rabbi, can you see where it says Toledo? It's
up there,
between
right?
Madrid. That's where my family came from.
Oh wow,
And
wow,
in 1492, they left there and they went through France to Germany and they changed the name from Safira to Shapiro. And then they went up to Lithuania.
wow, wow.
But my son and I, we visited Toledo. There's still 2 synagogues there, but from that era, there's no rabbi in it. But they
Wow.
maintained the windows and the ark. The ark's still there.
And right here is
And they,
Valencia. I see it.
yes,
Not too far from here.
yeah.
It's only, what is it, like 40 miles from Simi?
Yeah,
I'm just kidding around.
we took a bullet train from Madrid. It took us about an hour.
Oh wow. Wow. Right. So this the king, as you mentioned, the Muslim Arab king of this little kingdom was in Granada, but his scribe or one of his counselors was in Malaga, right, at the port. And somehow he ended up meeting, as we saw, the maidservant. They ended up becoming acquainted with Rabbi Shmuel, who was just a modest spice merchant. But somehow they figured out that he's very talented, he's very smart, and he took him in as his personal advisor. He was the advisor of the king, but he wanted to have Rabbi Shmuel as his personal advisor. But what happened was, when he passed away, he told the king that, listen, all my advice, the reason why you love me so much is because of Rabbi Shmuel. He's really the one, this Jewish fellow. So the king appointed him. So now Rabbi Shmuel became, suddenly, from being a little spice merchant, he became the the advisor. He became one of the top people in the kingdom. A lot of political power. So he of course he moved to Granada. That's where he moved over to the capital. And so this is, I think we said it was in the year 1013, it was in the year 1020. I'm sorry. I think we mentioned that year. In the year 1020, so Rabbi Shmuel at that time was at the ripe old age of 27.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
how old he was. He was born in 993, Rabbi Shmuel. So 1020, when he became, when he entered politics, so to speak, he was 27. Um, Now, as we're going to see, he ended up rising in the ranks, and he had an extremely influential life. He had his hand in literally every kind of thing you could imagine. He had his hand there. He was talented in everything, and he did a really good job. And everyone loved him. He's just a very, very amazing individual. Something interesting about him is that he was into poetry. He wrote poetry, and he wrote very well poetry. One of some of his most, we still have some of his poetry till today. One of his the famous ones, the famous pieces that he wrote, he named them after scriptures. So he wrote one of them. It's called Ben Tehillim, the son of the Psalms, which in other words, he was like trying to copy that kind of style. There's another one, Ben Kohelet, which is Ecclesiastes. So there's a few different ones like that. and eventually he became basically the the highest in command, right below the king of Granada. He became the highest in command, basically like the, I guess, the prime minister of the kingdom. At the same time, he was a religious Jew. He was a rabbi. The Jewish community appointed him as basically the chief rabbi, and he was
More,
doing
more modern Joseph.
exactly. He was literally like Joseph, but he had even more responsibilities than Joseph because Joseph wasn't a rabbi. Yeah, his father was a rabbi, or his brothers. So he became basically the chief rabbi of the kingdom. He had a yeshiva. He had he also at a certain point he even became the commander of the army.
Wow.
He commanded, and he actually led a lot of successful battles for the kingdom, all while being a rabbi and a prime minister and a poet at the same time. He even wrote poetry from the battlefield. After he won his battles, and we're going to see some of them soon. We're going to read some of them.
So he was really following in the footsteps of King David, of all of the
Right.
greats.
I think what's really, really interesting, I think he's probably the only person probably since King David, which was 1,500 years before him, probably the only person that was a warrior that fought wars and also wrote poetry.
Yeah.
It's very different kinds of. I mean, I'm sure there might have been other warriors that wrote poetry, but I don't know if they were good poetry. See, he was considered a very good poet. What was unique also about him is that he spoke Arabic very well. He had very good command of Arabic, which wasn't so common for Jewish people, and he wrote poetry in Arabic as well. And he kind of merged the two. So apparently there's certain kinds of structures of poetry, like there's different styles that were common in Arabic poetry, and he introduced them to Hebrew poetry. So, and a lot of these things became introduced into Hebrew poetry because of him. Let's look at text number 5. We're continuing. This is another quote from that same book we read before. We'll read some more about. So let me put that back up on the screen. This is text number. I'm sorry, text number 4. Text number 4.
Take turns reading the paragraphs if you like.
Yeah, we can do that. David wants to start with the beginning of text 4.
I can do that if I don't have to continue too far in it. Well,
yeah, it's a little shorter.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, let me see now. Okay. Rabbi Shmuel was appointed as Maggid in 4787. He achieved tremendous good for the Jewish people in Spain. The Maghreb. These are not going to.
I guess the names of the countries back then.
Oh, okay. For Carthage, Egypt, Sicily, and even as far as the Academy of Babylonia and its holy city of Jerusalem. He provided material benefits from his own purse for Torah students and in all these countries. He also purchased many books, copies of the old scriptures, and as well as of the Mishnah and Talmud, which are also considered sacred texts. Throughout Spain, the countries just mentioned, whoever wished to devote themselves full time to the study of Torah found in him a patron. Moreover, he became scribes who produced copies of the Mishnah and Torah, which he presented to students who were unable to purchase copies themselves, but in the academies of Spain, as well as in other countries mentioned. These gifts were complemented with annual contributions of olive oil for the synagogues of Jerusalem, which he would dispatch from his own estate.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so here we read about his influence amongst the Jewish community. I mean, the Jewish community was all over the world all over the place, like it is today. and he had with his connections, you can imagine he was very well connected. So he used it out. He helped Jewish people. We also read how he sponsored many things, and he really tried to establish Judaism. The Jewish community of Granada at that time was just starting out. It was a new community. So he really invested he did whatever was needed. He bought them books. Of course, they didn't have books in those days, but they had everything was hand copied. So he had people hand copy things.
So they didn't have the printing press yet.
Yeah, the printing press didn't come around until like 500 years afterwards.
Oh,
Around.
it's kind of hard to put everything in perspective. Yeah, they had to do everything by
Yeah.
hand.
So we said he had special scribes. He hired people to be there and write stuff. So there should be Jewish books. People should be able to study. So those are some of the many things that he did.
That's
The
why
Jewish
they were
life.
so smart.
Eventually, so I think he had 2 or 3 children. So his son Yosef. So his father was Yosef, and he named his son Yosef as well. I guess either his father passed away or young or whatever it was. And his son Yosef, the son married the daughter of another leading Torah, a leading rabbi of that time. So this rabbi was in another part of the world. He was actually I think he was in Tunisia. He's known as Rabbi Nissim Gaon. So he was also one of the top leading rabbis of the generation. So his daughter married the son, Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid. Yosef eventually took over his father, but he wasn't as well politically. He didn't do as well. He didn't know how to. I mean, you can imagine back in those days, especially the style of the way the Muslim kingdoms worked. It's very There were a lot of crazy things going on, a lot of dangerous people and all kinds of things.
And it amazes me that's really well in the early period times that people were able to perform so much with so little. And
Oh, yeah.
you stand on their shoulders.
Yeah, yeah,
He just wasn't a Trump. He didn't know the art of the deal.
right, right. Yeah, so Rabbi Shmuel really knew how to make everyone happy. I mean, there's different stories that we could say. I mean, there's one story where eventually the king passed away, and the king, he was working for the king. So the king had 2 sons, and there was, who's going to take over. There was a lot of, there's a lot of rivalry and whatever. And eventually he pushed for the younger son to take over because he felt it would work out better. But then there was the older brother tried to overthrow the king.
Oh,
So Rabbi Shmuel somehow figured out a way how to spy on them, and somehow he managed to diffuse the whole thing, and he ended up being liked by both sides. He ended up being supported by both sides. So that was just the kind of the skill that he had, politically. So everyone loved him. Everyone was happy with him. His son didn't do as well. So his son eventually took over when he passed away. His son, within a few years, he was assassinated because he didn't. I guess a theory that I heard was that his son grew up. The father, Rabbi Shmuel himself, grew up in a poor household. So I guess he was sensitive to all kinds of people. The son didn't grow up. The son grew up in royalty, so he didn't have that sense. That was a theory that I once heard. I don't know if we could really know. Okay, so let's read text number 5. It has the wrong title. It's not The Rise of the Nugget. This is actually a piece of poetry that Rabbi Shmuel wrote after one of the battles. So of course you can't really appreciate it if it's not in Hebrew, but at least a little bit. We'll get to learn a little bit about himself. I guess we're back to Lee. Text number 5.
Rabbi Yosef.
Oh, okay. Chana will do it. Okay.
Okay. A disastrous war erupted in the month of Iyar, the year of 4809 or 1049. The disaster unfolded when the inhabitants of Malgala betrayed our forces in the mountains on a Thursday that was the last day of the month of Iyar, May 10th. As a result, mighty officers were killed in the battle, and my father, may the exalted God bring him honor, was captured.
Oh wow. So far this is all the introduction, right? His son wrote this introduction in the before this entry of poetry. He wrote, kind of the background, like an editorial note, kind of. So he's writing the background. Yeah, I guess I'll continue. Want to continue, or should I continue? I'll continue. I'll continue this next piece. Yeah, so God saved him in a remarkable and unprecedented manner. After his rescue, he made a vow to collect and compose Hilchasa Gibarata, a comprehensive compendium of Jewish laws, which we don't have. We don't have it with us today. We lost it, through history. To introduce this work, he penned the following poem, which describes the war and his deliverance. So here's the poem. God has enabled me to expound on the Torah and mitzvot and blessed me with the ability to issue rulings. Listen to me, therefore, you virtuous people, and hear the Torah explained virtuously. I inquire into God's rules as best as I can, as far as my mind can probe. I point out the common errors to avert them, and write down the proper laws to establish them. I inscribe that which is beyond dispute, articulately and with clarity. I exhume every straight matter that had lain buried, and I lead every distorted matter to its grave.
That's a very poetic sentence.
Yeah. God, protect the door of my lips and mouth from expressing foreign and misguided notions. Be with my words to help me, just as you assisted me in my misfortune. Just as you recently delivered me into the hands of oppressors, and they decreed death on me, nevertheless you showed me great mercy to me while I was captured on the day of my calamity. You delivered me into their hands, but you are my mighty tower, my secure fortress. They seized me with their hands, but I was riding upon the precious clouds. They rushed to kill me with arrows like fiery flames, with spears like strong beams. They thought they could kill me with these weapons, but behold, their hands were tied behind their backs. The bands of my enemies were shamed, and my allies sing praise to the God of the universe. Therefore, on my lips, all my days and nights will be songs for the mighty God. Who can say that the dead will not be resurrected? I am a dead man brought up from the grave.
Yeah, that was in this poem.
So this is just a small sample of his poetry. Of course, I'm sure in Hebrew it would hit very differently. So here I guess because of, even though he lived so long ago, but because I guess of his stature, so we have a lot of details, we have a lot of stories and a lot of like documentation of his life. So I think from all the people we're going to talk about tonight, I think he has the most, even though the others lived much later than him. So as you mentioned before, he's very popular. Everyone looked up to him. Everyone respected him. He's a good example. Everyone took him as an example. He was a good person. He was, even with all his successes, he always stayed humble and he was always respectful of everyone. I'll share another story that they say about him is that he was once walking with the king after he was already, the second in command. They were walking down the street one time, and there was they were walking like in the marketplace, and some Arab merchant didn't like Jews, so he started cursing him. And the king right away summoned he summoned him over, and he said, "Listen, you have to be punished. You can't do this." And he told Rabbi Shmuel, he told him, "Listen, you have full permission to cut off his tongue." That's the way things worked in those countries. They would just cut limbs off. Rabbi Shmuel decided, instead of cutting off his tongue, he's going to give him a good tongue. He's going to replace his bad tongue with his good tongue. What he did was he gave him presents, and he basically the person's attitude changed, and instead he became a friend. It says, the story goes that later on the king ended up the king again walked through the marketplace, and he saw the same fellow, and he was still talking. So he asked Rabbi Shmuel, "Why didn't you cut off his tongue?" And he said, "I did, and I gave him a good tongue instead." That was the story. So he was, even though he had all this power, but he I don't know what the right word is, but he was a very special man. So text number 6, I think this is so text number 6, I think this is the last. Yeah, this is the last quote we have for this story. So this is not even from a Jewish source. This is from some Arabic poet that lived during that time, and he heaps praises on Rabbi Shmuel, but very specifically, there's gonna be a certain kind of praise which is really in line with with the topic of tonight. So we're gonna read that. Could I ask Lee for text numbers for right here, text number 6?
Okay. Those who count Moses among them and enjoy his light say that what you want about them, but you will not arrive at 1/10 of their qualities. How many visible marvels on earth they have accomplished, and how many generous gifts they have continuously given to people. You, Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid, are superior to the noble men of the Orient and the Occident, just as gold is superior to copper in importance. If people could distinguish between doom and right way, they would have to kiss your 10 fingers. Thanks to you, I have won this world, and I have satisfied my wishes. Thanks to you, I long to meet the same gain in the other world. I profess openly the religion which prescribes observance of Saturday when I stand before you, and when I am among my compatriots, I believe in that religion secretly.
Wow. So this individual apparently was a respected poet of that time, and he had a lot of respect for Judaism because of Rabbi Shmuel. So this is just a nice example. Of course, I'm sure he had a much broader impact, but this person, this specific individual he was positively affected by this rabbi, and his behavior was a light unto the nations, as we say. So that's our first example for tonight, Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid. I want to show one more artifact that we have here. Why this one here? So right here, this is a gate which exists in Granada until today. This was the ancient city gate, which was built in the same period as Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid. So it's still there. Yeah, so it's 1,000 years old.
Did they used to have a wall like that going all the way around, and that's all that's left?
Possibly. I don't know the full story. I did read somewhere. I read that the wall was like refortified. So it was built in the 1100s or the 1000s, but in the 1400s it had to be refortified. But it never went down. It's still there.
It's
So,
amazing, these places on the earth that are still standing
Yeah.
after so many
and just look how thick
years.
that wall is. It's like it must be 15 feet wide, thick, just a wall.
Wow.
Okay. So that ends the story of Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid. I mean, there's a lot more to say, but we'll have to get back to him maybe another time. So now we're gonna move ahead about 500 years, maybe 600 years even, and back to Spain, actually, still in Spain. So in 1493 there was or 1496, I think.
1492, Spanish Inquisition.
92, okay. So there's a Spanish Inquisition, and then I think Portugal, I think was maybe a few years later, or maybe it was the same. It was definitely around within the same decade. Both of these countries expelled all Jews.
That's why they say when Christopher Columbus came to America in 1492, there were some secretly hidden Jews in his ship that went to the New World.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have a list of some of their names. I think one of them was the scribe on the ship. But they were leaving Spain because they had a choice to convert, to die, or to leave. But usually when they left, they were made into slaves. So they left, but they became known as Marranos, hidden Jews.
Right. So our personality, so his parents, I think they were in Portugal, I think they were living, and I think they initially did not leave. I think they initially actually faked to accept another religion
There was a community in Mexico.
of these Marranos.
Yes.
Oh, really? Yeah, at that time it was, I mean, a big portion of the Jewish world was living in that area, in that Iberian Peninsula. I think that's what it's called. So the individual we're talking about, his name is Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael, Menashe ben Israel. That's the way he's known. He doesn't have a last name or anything. So his parents apparently they originally openly took on another religion, but eventually they escaped. They ran away from Portugal and they ran away to Amsterdam, which is north, you know. So they moved north. Amsterdam was a lot more open. A lot of Jews, all the Jews that escaped, Spain and Portugal, they all went to Amsterdam. Like that was the first. It was much more freedom of religion.
It's kind of like jumping from a frying pan into the fire. Eventually what happened in
Right,
Amsterdam.
right. Yeah, the Jews are always they're always after the Jews. They're just jumping around, escaping from one place to another. So our rabbi, so we have the picture here on the screen. They say this is what he looked like. Some people are skeptical if that's really him, or maybe it's someone else.
It doesn't look
But
Jewish.
right, so he was obviously coming from Spanish background. So we know him as a rabbi. He served as a rabbi, but we'll see soon some interesting things which are not you won't imagine of a regular classic rabbi.
Maybe his wife is a hacienda.
I don't know. Okay, so he was born in Amsterdam to this kind of family, and he immediately, as a child, of course, he was very very smart. He was very talented. At the age of 18, he was appointed to be part of the group of rabbis. There was like a Beit Din, there was like a Jewish court, so he was added to the group at age 18. So he was very very smart, very smart. He knew all the Talmudic texts and he knew Torah very well, and he also knew other things. He also knew, other kinds of sciences, and he quickly became very famous, and even he was also very talented. Besides for being famous in the Jewish world, he also was very talented in these other sciences. So many other non-Jewish people also made connections with him, and he was connected with all kinds of people, all kinds of non-Jewish people. He was connected with the queen of Scandinavia, and he had that connection. The story goes that at a certain point he realized he's not making money. I guess a rabbi wasn't a good paying job in that time and place. So he went into business. He opened up a Hebrew printing press in Amsterdam. With time, it actually became a very successful printing press and printed the nicest Jewish books of the time. This is by the way, this is just like the first century after the printing press was going on. That's when it was a very original idea. So he started off this printing press, but it didn't go too well in the beginning. He wasn't making enough money. So he came up with another plan. He decided he wanted to move to Brazil. I don't know what he had. I don't know how that would help the issue, but he had this plan of moving to Brazil. Last minute, it didn't work out because he ended up staying because there was these two brothers, these also Spanish Jews, people who also escaped from Spain, but they were very wealthy, and they realized there's such a genius, such a special rabbi. He's going to leave us. We can't let that happen. We have to keep him here. So they got together and they sponsored him, and I think they started a synagogue for him, and so he stayed. He stayed in Amsterdam. So one of the things which I find interesting, usually a rabbi, when he writes a book in, if he writes a Jewish book about Judaism, at least back then, it was in Hebrew. That's a classic way things were done. This Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael, he wrote many books about Judaism, and none of them are in Hebrew. He wrote them in Spanish or Latin. That's how they were printed. So he wrote different kinds of things to kind of like defend the Torah, defend the Bible, right? There's a lot of Bible critics, So
Did
he
he
wrote.
write it in Dutch?
I'm not sure I don't remember exactly which language they were written in. He might have been Dutch, possibly.
Okay.
He grew up. His family was originally Spanish, so he was definitely familiar with that. Also, and many of the, his community was also that was their language. That was familiar to many Jewish people in the community, and you can imagine a lot of all half of the Jewish community was coming from either they converted, there's a very strong influence of the Inquisition, and so a lot of Jewish people were influenced, and people had questions about they had doubts, they didn't know the Jewish approach to the Torah. So he wrote different books to kind of to defend and to explain. And he wrote them in not in Hebrew, he wrote them in other languages. So here we have text number 7. We have a quote from one of his books. It's called The Conciliator, or he wrote a book to reconcile like different things that look like contradictions in the Torah. So that's what he wrote in this book. So here we have it in text number 7. We have it translated. Yeah, where are we holding? Saying Lee did the last one, right? Who wants to read this next one? I could read. I'll read text number 7. Okay, so he says, oh, let me show it up on the screen here. There it is. Yeah. I conceive that my work will be acceptable to the learned, for if duly examined, we shall find that the study and lecture of the Talmud were not considered unimportant. Some of the present questions were asked by the Alexandrians of Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanina, an illustrious and learned sage, as stated in the Gemara Nida. We also learned from Brachot, Tolin, and other parts that some heathen princes mooted similar doubts to the ancients, who, as disciples of the prophets, could alone interpret and solve many passages which, from their difficulty, would otherwise have been unintelligible. No little honor will accrue from it to the Hebrew nation and the sages of Israel, as the knowledge and intelligence they possessed will be clearly seen in this book. So this is kind of the introduction, where he's explaining how Judaism has answers to all these questions. A lot of the questions in his time had already been asked, 1,500 years before him. Some of them are recorded in the Talmud, so that's what he presents in that book. A lot of these books are like, for example, this one, and some of the other books are translated and they're available today. You could get them in English. Might be interesting read. So Rabbi Menashe, as we said, he had many connections with the non-Jewish world. We mentioned the Queen, and there were others. So he tried to use his connections to help the Jewish community. So one of the things he actually lobbied for a while, he tried to convince the Queen of Scandinavia to let Jews settle in that country. And she almost agreed, but unfortunately she lost the throne before she could make it happen. So it almost happened. After that, he tried moving to England. He tried getting the same to happen in England, because Jews had been expelled from England in the year 1260 or something like that.
I think they got to come back eventually.
Right. So he was the one who started off the process. I'm not sure. It definitely didn't happen in his lifetime, but I think he was the one who got it started. There was, around that time, towards the end of his life, there was like new, there was shifts in England, and there's like a different strain of religion, and they were more open to Jewish people. They were more tolerant. So he sent a lot of letters, a lot of conversations, and he had through different connections that he had, they all put pressure, and eventually he went to England for a meeting. He had a whole official meeting with whatever it was, the king or whatever it's called. And the man, we have his name somewhere. I forgot what his name was. Yeah. So the man was very impressed with this Rabbi Menashe, and he decided actually to give him a stipend. He decided that the country of England wants to support this rabbi, so whatever it was, 100 silver coins a year or whatever it was. So the thing, what happened was that on his way home back home from England to Amsterdam, he passed away. He never got to receive the stipend, and he never got to see Jews living in England really, but he kind of started the process. And so that's, in short, that's the life of Rabbi Menashe. So here we have him on. This might be what he looked like. We have him on the screen, and then we'll see a few other things that I collected. So this is another one of his books. This might be Latin. If anyone knows how to read Latin, you can tell me if that's what it is. But I think this book was written in Latin. So in Hebrew, it's called Nishmat Chayim. It's about the soul and life and death. Like that's the topic of the book. It was printed in Amstelodami, so I guess that's Amsterdam. So this is just this is just a random title of one of the books that he wrote. On the top it says Menashe ben Israel. That's his name. Yeah, here we have where he lived, Amsterdam. It's on the map in case we don't know what the map looks like. So I have it there. And here, this is his grave. We know where it is. It's in Amsterdam. He's buried in Amsterdam. This is what his grave looks like. Nothing too fancy, but he was a very great rabbi. He had a lot of impact. They say that he also learned some Kabbalah. So he was well versed in that, and he had, some people even claim that he had a big focus on the Mashiach. That was like a thing that he tried to make happen. He wanted the Mashiach to come, and some people even speculate that the reason why he wanted Jews to move to England was because, in his understanding, according to Kabbalah, there was some spiritual significance to that, and if Jews would settle in England, that would help Mashiach come faster. That's what some people speculate even. So that's the kind of person that he was. So let's read text number 8. This is from another one of the books that he wrote, and he writes about the 7 Noahide laws, which we mentioned before.
Yes.
Actually, so the book, it's called in English, it's called On Resurrection of the Dead, right? So it's about the Mashiach. It's about the future redemption. So that's a topic of the book. So here we have. Let's read text number 8. Whose turn is it? David, is it short enough?
I have trouble forging my.
Okay, I'll read it. I'll read it as I practice my English. In the same way, great Lord, that in any well-governed republic, the subjects are given laws under which to live. Being God, the architect and supreme creator of the universe, it must be believed infallibly that he has constituted laws for his subjects and creatures. Because otherwise, how could the world be sustained? Or what way would there be to live among men if they were not governed by divine command? Thus we believe that he has given to all nations the 7 precepts, which are called the laws of the sons of Noah, who are all over the world. And these are, and he tells us the 7 laws. It says not to idolize, not to kill, not to adulterate, not to steal, not to curse in the name of God, not to eat the meat of live animals, and to establish judges who enforce these laws. We know this from other sources. These are the 7 Noahide laws. Also, to the children of Israel, whom he chose as his people, he further established the law of Moses, contained in 613 precepts. Yeah, so he's giving us some background and explaining to us how it works. Just like when an architect builds something, he makes rules. He makes rules of the city. So when God built the world, he built rules for everyone. Text number 9, we go back. We read another quote, and this is back. This goes back 500 years or so, 600 years, back to Maimonides. I don't think I ever taught a class without quoting Maimonides. So this is our quote for tonight. So Maimonides speaks about which actually is interesting. It's very unique. Maimonides writes, the goal of his book is to tell us Jewish law, to tell us the 630 commandments, exactly all the details. But besides for that, somehow in his book, he also writes about these 7 Noahide laws, which are not even for Jewish people. It's for all of humanity.
So I noticed that in the 7 laws of Noah, there's nothing about honoring your parents and nothing about the Shabbat.
Right. Yeah, Shabbat is definitely not included. So there's a lot of we call them 7 laws, but there's other things which are included. So there's really more than 7. So like for example, giving charity and being kind to others, and honoring parents would I guess be included in those. So those are also counted as part of the Noahide laws, even though they're not one of the 7.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, let me read text number 9 from Maimonides. Moses delivered to us the divine command to ensure that all inhabitants of the world accept the Noahide laws. Right. So this is something that Moses already said. Moses didn't only tell the Jewish people what Jews should do; he told the Jewish people what everyone should do. Yeah. Anyone who accepts these 7 laws and observes them, right? So the Maimonides enumerated the laws. We're not quoting it here. Yeah. Anyone who accepts the 7 laws and observes them is considered one of the righteous among the nations and earns themselves a place in the world to come. This is contingent on acceptance of the laws because they were commanded by God in the Torah. And Moses informed us that Noah's descendants had previously been commanded to observe them. Right, so it's important that Maimonides is making the point that it's important for a non-Jew, even if they're observing these laws, it's important that they do it with the knowledge that this is commanded by Moses and from God. They shouldn't be just doing it because it's a nice thing to do. They should be doing it because this is God's blueprint for the world.
8:30 p.m.
Interesting. I read somewhere that going back to our story of our Rabbi Menashe ben Israel. So he was in contact. He had these different connections among non-Jews. So there were several non-Jews who became very involved in the 7 Noahide laws. They wanted to promote it. They wanted to spread it because of his influence.
Yeah, see, it's text number 10 is interesting too.
Yes. Oh, perfect. So let's read number 10.
Several eminent Christian scholars, all of them Christian Hebrewists, evinced an extraordinary interest in Noahide law. Manasseh was in contact with 2 such scholars, Hugo and Peter, I'll leave their names unsaid, was undoubtedly familiar with a third, John Selden. These scholars had rediscovered, as it were, in rabbinic and Old Testament sources, an ancient model for governance, one they believed to be something resembling, if not constituting, ancient articulation of natural law. Couldn't this guy associated Noahide law with something like natural law in his work of 1617, De Republica Herbaria, did the same. The Christian herbalist John Selden published his De Jus Naturale, an entire work that takes as its premise that Noahide law and the law of nature are one and the same. Selden cited Manasseh as an authority.
Wow. Yeah. So there's different. So he clearly had this impact on non-Jewish people.
But if they're just thinking of natural law, are they giving Hashem the credit?
So I'm not sure what he means by natural law. I'm not even sure.
Yeah,
That's an interesting question. Yeah. So I don't know. So that's regarding this third fellow, Selden. The other 2 fellows are clearly interested in the Noahide law and clearly attributed it to a Jewish rabbi. So when we talk about being a light unto the nations, so here's a great example of Rabbi Menashe ben Israel. he had this impact on all these big non-Jewish people to get involved in the seven Noahide laws to make to follow God's blueprint of the world. So that's another way. This is another, I guess, another kind of example of being a light unto the nations. Okay, so let's move on to the next story. I know it's getting late already. Let's move on to our third rabbi. So this rabbi, he's known as Rabbi Ovadia Seforno. He actually lived, so a little bit of it, we're going to skip around a little bit in the time. So he lived about 100 years before this. So he lived in, I guess, the 1500s, early 1500s, and he lived in Italy. So Italy was a better place for the Jews at the time, right? There was no expulsion or anything. So his name was Seforno. Seforno is actually a last name. He came from a famous family, an illustrious family known as the Seforno family. His father was a rabbi and everything. There's a commentary on the Torah called the Seforno. So it was written by this fellow, this Rabbi Ovadia that we're talking about now. He wrote this commentary known as Seforno, and I think it's very unique because most commentaries, right, in the Torah, there's usually a name for it. There's a special name for the book. Let's say Maimonides, for example, he's not known as by his last name. He's known by Maimonides, which is an interesting name based on his father's name, Maimonides. I mean, most Torah books are written are named with a specific name, either the writer made up a name of his book, or we know him by his personal name. Like for example, Rashi, right? Rashi is an acronym for his full name, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. So his personal name was Shlomo, his last name was Yitzchaki. This commentary that we're talking about now the commentary is known just by one word, and the word is Seforno. Seforno is just a last name. So it's interesting. I don't know why his commentary, he never gave a name to his commentary. I don't know exactly why, but his commentary that he wrote is called Seforno. So so his name was Ovadia. He was born to a man named Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov was already a big scholar in his own right, and he was born in the city called Cesena, Italy. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, of course, just like in the other people that we mentioned, he was a talented. He was recognized as a scholar from a young age, and all besides for being scholarly in the Torah, he was also scholarly. He studied other kinds of things. He studied philosophy. He studied math. And at around age of 20, he decided he wants to study medicine in Rome. So he traveled to Rome, and he spent many years in Rome, studying medicine. There's a Jewish community in Rome, so he had, the great rabbis of Rome at the time. They heard about this Rabbi Ovadia Seforno, and they made their connections with him. They consulted with him on many things. He also, at this time, he was already writing his commentary. He wrote a commentary on the Torah. Now, interestingly, at that time, the Pope, I think it was the Pope, had a Jewish doctor. I'm forgetting his name now, but the Pope had a Jewish doctor, and this Rabbi Ovadia Seforno was studying medicine. So because of that, he got introduced to the Pope, and he made connections with all kinds of people in that sphere, all kinds of Christian people.
Well, it's interesting that he wrote things for Christians.
Yes.
I just wonder what happened in the Christian community that eventually they really turned against the Jews.
Yeah.
There was a pope, I don't know which one it was, I don't know how true it is supposed to have burned copies of the Talmud.
Right. That was it was in Italy. It was It was later. I think it was 200 years later. So
There was a time when they got along together, good together, and they
yeah,
studied Jewish books. And
yeah,
then there was a time when no more.
yeah. I
Wow.
mean, the same as with the Muslim world. The Jews. We mentioned the first person we mentioned, Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid. He worked in a Muslim palace, an Arab palace.
Yeah,
So and
that's
today,
right.
if you look at the relationship of the Jews and the Muslims today, it's very different. So things change over time, very dramatic ways. So one of the people that Rabbi Avadia Seferno, connected with in Rome was a man by the name of Johann Ruchlin. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. Ruchlin. He was a very famous uh, Bible specialist, non-Jewish, but he wrote about the Bible and he wrote all kinds of books. And he's very into. He ended up later on doing a lot of good things for Jewish people. But how did he start off? What was his? How did he become so acquainted with the Torah and with Hebrew, the Hebrew language? So the story goes that he decided he wants to learn Hebrew, and he had some basic knowledge of Hebrew. Whichever books he was able to get his hands on, but eventually he decided he wants to become like a professional. He wants to know Hebrew very well, know all the grammar. So he asked the Pope, and the Pope recommended this Rabbi Avadia, Rabbi Avadia Seferno. So they actually studied together for like 2 years. He taught him Hebrew, and he later on wrote books on the Bible, and it was all based on that partnership. So here, text 11. Let's read text 11. I'll read text 11. This is historians writing about this individual, this Reuchlin, and his Jewish books. Yeah. So in 1498 or 99, as ambassador of the Palatinate, Reuchlin also studied Hebrew under the renowned Jewish scholar Ovadia Seferno in Rome. With intensive instruction from Seferno as well as his own efforts, Reuchlin was able to publish the first Hebrew grammar and lexicon for Christians. The book, written in Latin, is based heavily on the medieval Jewish grammar of Moses Kimchi and the famous Hebrew dictionary, the Book of Roots, by David Kimchi. If you remember, Rabbi David Kimchi was the second text that we read tonight was quoted from him as well. Yeah, the story. So what did this Reuchlin fellow, what did he end up doing? So about 10 years later, in the year 1509 or 1510, I think it was the Pope decided to get rid of all. They wanted to like suppress Jewish religion, so they decided to confiscate all Jewish books, besides for I think just the Torah itself. Everything else, the Talmud, whatever it was, they confiscated. And this was enforced in Rome and a few other areas, I think in Germany. And eventually they kind of wanted to like show that they didn't want it to look bad. So they called in like a whole like committee of 7 people to kind of make their own investigations about the Jewish books to make sure that the Jewish books are really terrible books and you can't have them. And 6 of these people on the team, on the committee, they kind of endorsed this whole confiscation of Jewish books. But Reuchlin, this fellow who had learned Hebrew with Rabbi Seferno, who got that Hebrew tutoring, he was the only one who actually endorsed the Talmud. He said the Talmud is a very good book. There's nothing wrong with it, and he was very, very vocal. And he ended up, because of him, even though he was only 1 against 6, he ended up preventing and abolishing the whole story, and the Jewish community was able to have their books back, as far as we know. So this is, I guess, another example of a light unto the nations. Text number 12. Could I ask Lee to do text number 12?
Sure. Rabbi Yosaman of Rosham Journal published. Okay, I can skip that part. In the year 1510, enemies and renegades rose up against our people, seeking to destroy our Torah books. God showed us a miracle within a miracle as non-Jewish scholars countered our oppressors and returned the Torah books to their former glory.
Right.
Yeah, so this is a quote from a Jewish rabbi who lived around that time. So he writes about this, but we also know, I mean, we know the story from from other sources as well. So that's Rabbi Avadia Sforno. So he spent a lot of time in Rome. At a certain point, he decided to do some wandering. So he wandered all around, I guess, all around Italy to different Jewish communities, I guess, to become acquainted with, with the Jewish people and what's going on. Eventually, he ended up moving to the city of Bologna, something like that. I guess another city in Italy. Let's see if I have it. If I have a map of it. Oh, so this is actually this building here on the screen. This is still around in Italy in Bologna, called Casa Saforno.
Oh,
It belonged to the Saforno family for many years. So this I don't know what goes on in this building now. It might just be like a restaurant or whatever, but that's what this building used to be originally. So here we have that's where Rome is on the map. This apparently is a picture of that non-Jewish man Reuchlin. This is apparently I don't know if it's an accurate picture, but this is apparently might be what he looked like. What else do I have here? This is looks like an artist's rendition of Rabbi Seferno. Probably not accurate. What else do we have? This is our last thing. Okay. Yeah, so he ended up moving to Bologna, which is another city. I think it's more north in Italy.
Yeah.
He actually had a brother there. Rabbi Seferno had a brother. His name was Rabbi Hananel, who I guess he was a rabbi there or whatever. So Rabbi Avadia settled. He was a lot more famous, so he settled there as well, and he ended up opening a yeshiva, and he spent the rest of his life in Bologna. So here we have actually this book. If you look at the last line there, it says Bologna in Hebrew. That's where this book is printed. The name of the book is called Or Amim, which means the light unto the nations. So that's actually a book that he wrote. He wrote it, I think, originally in Hebrew. I'm not sure exactly the content of the book, but I guess it's to explain Judaism to other religions. I'm not sure exactly in which way. It might be like more philosophy. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but he wrote it originally in Hebrew, and then he later translated it to Latin. He himself translated it to Latin. The story goes that he dedicated he dedicated the Latin translation to the King of France, because it was like a personal friend. He spent time with the King of France back when he was in Rome, and then when he wrote this book, he dedicated the translation to, I think it was King Charles, I think. So that's about this book. So he actually wrote all his books originally in Hebrew, just like you would expect from like most rabbis. That we mentioned also his commentary on the Torah, which is known as Seforno, which is his last name. And here we have. So let's read the last quotes. Text 13. This is actually from his commentary on the Torah, and we see what he writes about the concept of a light unto the nations.
It says, "You shall be to me a kingdom of priests. You shall be a unique treasure to me in the sense that you will be a kingdom of priests whose mission is to guide and teach the entire human race to call upon the name of God and to serve him with one purpose." Zephaniah 3:9.
Beautiful. So he explains that the concept of priests is again the same concept. It's the concept of teaching the world to call the name of God. So that concludes the story of Rabbi Seferno. I think we could, if all take a lesson, each and every one of us, to be a light unto the nations. And we mentioned here the 7 Noahide laws. It's a good thing to promote. Actually, the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in the year 19, I think it was 84, maybe it was 85, he suddenly came out with a big, kind of like almost like a campaign. He wanted Jewish people to promote the Noahide laws. Every Jewish person even if you're living in a Jewish community, you come in contact with non-Jews. And the Rebbe made the point that up until modern history, we never really had this opportunity. No one really cared about what the Jews had to say. The Jews were just oppressed and expelled from every country. And in today's day and age, we actually have the people actually want to hear what we want to say. We actually have the opportunity to spread the seven Noahide laws. So the Rebbe made a point that we should utilize that opportunity. So we should all use out the opportunity whenever we have it. And before we go, I want to do this special mitzvah. So let me pull it up on the screen. It is. Yeah, so today is 2
32
days, which is 4 weeks.
And 4 days of the Omer.
4 days of the Omer.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
All right.
I did it on your phone too.
There we go.
Thank you for sharing your screen with me, Rabbi, and your wisdom. And I apologize to my friend Hannah there. I didn't get to make her any tea tonight.
Hannah, did you hear that?